Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
I know you like it when we have couples on the show, so we're at it again. My guests are Dedric and Krystal Polite. They're the stars of 50/50 Flip on Hulu and A&E. They started as wholesalers right before and then during the pandemic, figured it out, got into rentals, and all the way up to flipping on TV. You're going to love this story, and it's a great episode of just watching a couple succeed together, buying into the journey together. Let's do it. This is episode 166 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guests. Yes, we have couple guests again this week, Dedric and Krystal Polite. They are stars of 50/50 Flip on Hulu and A&E, real estate investors, entrepreneurs, mentors, also the owners and founders of Be Polite Properties, which is a home buying and acquisition company, now growing into other markets. Dedric and Krystal, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jonathan. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you guys about your journey and where it all started. So let's start there. I think, Dedric, you were ahead of Krystal on the real estate bug, but when did it first hit for you? And then I'll get to you, Krystal.
Yeah, the real estate bug hit me as a kid. I remember in the 90s, I grew up in the 90s, my mom had the Carlton Sheets program, the No Money Down program.
Yeah.
And as 13, 14-year-old kid, I don't know, when I'd get bored, I'd literally pop those tapes in the VHS, watch it, and dream of like one day owning a mansion, owning the fancy cars. And it kind of planted the seed for me. And then fast forward to 2001, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that's when I really got the bug. Like, all right, I need to become financially free. How do I do that? Either own a business or own real estate. But I did what most people are taught to do. I went to school, went to college, got a degree, went into corporate America, and I hated it, right? But I was more of an entrepreneur. I was like, man, I wish I could do this real estate thing. Never quite took the leap until I met Krystal, right? I was more the safe, secure, conservative person. She's more the risk taker. So when we got together, she was the one like, hey, you got all these books, you got all these tapes, all these programs you've been to, seminars. Why aren't you doing this? And she really gave me lit the fire under me to be like, all right, let's start actually taking action.
Yeah, awesome. And Krystal, did you have an interest before? You're like, listen, your whole library here, can we put this thing to use?
No, I really didn't have an interest before. It really came about when he showed a huge interest in it. Mine was just entrepreneurship. So it wasn't in one specific area. When I met him, I was an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur. That was where my focus was. So as long as it was a business, I was interested in it. So when he said, listen, this is what I wanted to do, and kept saying it, but wasn't really taking action, I started to research it on my own and started researching a lot of what he was talking about. So once I start researching and have to start reading a bunch of books and then watching podcasts, and you best believe we doing it at that point. So that's really how it started. Once I started doing my own research and listening to a lot of individuals and YouTube University, I say, yeah, we all in now.
Yeah, it makes sense. And what I've found is that, what's really helpful for listeners is you can start whenever. You don't have to be, doing it from a kid as I did. But entrepreneurs become very successful because it's another way where the money can be made if you do things correctly. Did those things start to align for you, Krystal? You're like, well, I have the spirit. Dedric's got all these books. I know he wants to do this. What if we do it together, combine forces? And then, this is, of course, what got you to where you guys are now.
Oh, absolutely. That's really what it was for me. So in our relationship, I'm the visionary. Dedric is the integrator. Yep. So for me, once I knew that he had an interest in it, I know how I am with implementation. So I know I also have a lot of integrator in me. So I knew at that point, okay, he has the knowledge. Now we just need to apply it and focus him because he has that analysis paralysis. So Dedric will beat an idea into the ground if you let him. So at that point, I said, listen, he knows enough about it. He's already purchased his own first property himself. Let me, learn a bit more about it, and then let's go full steam ahead. Strategically, though, right? So we tell a lot of people we didn't quit the day job. I know they see it, and people think it's sexy. I did 2 deals. I quit the
Burn
day
your
job.
ships, quit your job after one deal. No, don't do that.
We weren't crazy. We did it strategically over the course of a couple years.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. I always call that runway for people, especially because exactly what you were saying. I see a lot of people, they're like, I'm 20, I'm ready to quit my job and pursue financial freedom. It's like, but you don't have anything in the financial end.
Right.
How are you building a foundation? So I really like that because I think you have to know, like, hey, let's make a 1-2 year plan. Sometimes one person stops the 9 to 5 earlier so you can get going. How did that work for you guys, Dedric, when you were trying to figure out, like, hey, who's going to stop first or how are we going to work on this together?
Yeah, how it worked is we had just got married. We both were working jobs. And I was doing pretty well. I was making 6 figures at my job, but I just absolutely hated it. It was this soul-sucking corporate, drudgery. And she was working as well, but she was working from home. So we got into real estate and we decided to get into wholesaling first. Our main goal was to build a buy and hold portfolio, but we didn't have a lot of cash. We didn't have a huge savings or any rich uncle to kind of get us started. So we hired a mentor, and our mentor was like, look, if you guys want to start buying rentals and you don't have money, start out with wholesaling, start making some capital and some cash, save that up, and then buy rental properties. So we strategically got into wholesaling. Our first wholesale deal, we made $11,000. Second deal, we made $5,000. And our third deal, we made $105,000. This was a virtual wholesale
big
deal.
upgrade.
Yeah.
So that was eye-opening where I was like, man, I can actually quit my job from this, but I didn't quit right away. Strategically, what we did is that first year, we actually banked a percentage of her salary. So the first quarter, we banked 25% of her salary, and we figured out how could we live off the other 75% of her salary and my salary. Then the second quarter, we banked 50%, and each quarter we increased it until we were living off of just my salary. And at that point, we decided to fire her boss. So she went full-time first.
Yeah.
And then a year or two later, we fired my boss. But that gave us the runway to be able to transition from both working full-time to both being full-time in the business.
And within doing that, we were able also to leverage Dedric's W-2 job. So that was also a reason why I went full-time into the business before he did.
Yeah.
Because we leveraged his
to get more loans
W-2,
and more mortgages.
Exactly, to acquire more properties while we still had it. So we literally, while we kept his day job for the next year or two, that's what we focused on, was buying more properties.
Yeah, so smart. I mean, people forget that they have to be lendable. If you want to grow and scale and get more properties, someone has to give you money, and you're going to not just be able to everyone get to private lenders that way. So that's really smart. How long was the overall time between the time you guys decided to start buying until you were both all in together?
Yeah, so we closed our first wholesale deal in August of 2018. And then by January of 2020, we were both full-time in the business.
Wow.
Yeah.
And weird time, though. So what happened? You go full time and then boom, here comes the pandemic. How did you guys handle that as new wholesalers getting that not new, but new all out in together?
So at that point, we had built up a successful wholesaling business. Business was bringing in about 7 figures a year. But again, we were plowing a lot of those profits into buying rental properties. So by the time we left our job, we probably had 40 rental units at the time. So we had enough passive income plus the active income from wholesaling.
Yep.
So that happened. I left my job right before COVID hit. When COVID hit, the whole world shut down for a few months. But then by the summertime, the market came roaring back.
Yeah.
So, we were fine.
And during COVID, what works for us was when we first started out, Dedric and I are from Boston, Massachusetts originally. And when we started in real estate, I know a lot of people say, hey, start in your backyard, which is true. But I also like to remind people that a lot of us are transplants. So where we originally are from is not where we're living now. And then I remind them, do you have to physically be in an area or in a state that you lived in for 40 years of your life to know that market? And for us, it was a no. So we were doing virtual wholesaling from the very beginning of us getting into real estate. And Boston was one of our markets. So when the pandemic hit, we just really transitioned to just doing everything virtual. So we tell people our real estate business really never stopped during the pandemic. We were just dealing with sellers virtually and was saying, hey, we didn't have to go to the properties. We can give you an offer here. And we were literally just closing deals through email. We were closing deals through text messages. Some of them we never physically spoken to the seller ever. Everything was done through an email correspondence. So it was just a way of us knowing how to pivot at that point when the pandemic hit.
Yeah, and you had already built up a lot of experience at that point. So you were kind of way, way ahead of the curve to handle. Plus, then you had that whole time that you could work on your new business together because you couldn't go anywhere.
Exactly.
So it's like you probably got a 6 months boot camp and like, hey, we're really going to get this thing going and work on some of the kinks that might help us grow faster when it ends.
There you go.
What you said was really interesting because you had moved from Boston, but you focused on Boston virtually to wholesale. That's really smart because I do think that does give you a competitive advantage. Mm-hmm. I think it can be done a lot of times, but virtual wholesalers, at least the very new ones, think they can open any market and just know it from Google, but you could be 3 years behind. So give us a little bit about how it worked for you for Boston where you had knowledge, and then I'm sure you've grown into different areas as you've gone.
Yeah, just like you said, John, with you growing up in New York and New Jersey, even if you're living in Florida, you know which neighborhoods of Brooklyn are being gentrified right now. Someone tells you, Flatbush or Fulton Street or whatever, you know what's going on in those neighborhoods because you have friends and family there and you lived there for a long time, even if you're in Florida. So that was the kind of market intelligence we used when we were in North Carolina to wholesale deals in Boston. And then, of course, over the years, we've become market experts in North Carolina, which is our backyard. So now we know this area like the back of our hand. But again, it doesn't happen overnight. It comes from, trial and error and years of researching the market and making offers and being in the market consistently.
And having that advantage of saying, hey, this is where I grew up. This is where I'm from. We have friends and family there. So anytime we needed someone to go out and take pictures of a property, that's what we had them do. Call them up. Hey, I'll give you $50. Can you go run and take some pictures and videos? That's literally all we needed for people to do, even till this day. And because of who we are and people know, even back then, before the TV show, people knew we were in real estate through our social media.
Yeah.
So people would send us deals. When you're in markets like the New Yorks, the certain areas of Jersey, Massachusetts, Boston in particular, these areas, people know what they're sitting on. So we get a majority of our leads from there through referrals. Dedric and I went back last weekend, literally just for the day before a wedding. We got off the flight, called one friend and said, hey, I'm in town. What are you doing? She was like, great. I got a property for you to take a look at. I was like, okay. She was like, I'm at the property right now with the lady. When can you come over? I said, hey, we'll be over there. Give us the address. We'll meet you there. And so when you're in price point markets like that, it's basically done off referrals. People know they're sitting on $1 million properties, right? Yeah. They're savvy to that. But that's how virtual is being done. And then when you add on the fact that these are neighborhoods or areas that is completely gentrified, that adds that layer onto it. So thankfully we've established a name and a reputation where people know that, we are the go-tos.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's built up over so much time, though. So tell us a little bit about what it was like in the beginning. Social media has helped everybody, I think, who does it correctly, establish a part of a hybrid brand that, is a little bit more trustworthy than what's out there, even though there's a lot of fake stuff on social media. But you guys kept going and delivering more and more. How much has that helped you? And how can someone who maybe is in the beginning can learn from how you guys started just on social media and then getting all the way to the show?
Yeah, as far as social media specifically, Krystal's very private, so she doesn't do a lot of the posting. I actually do a lot of the posting. But
I see her on a lot of posts, though. So
he got to include me.
Yeah, I got to put her pretty face up there to get those views. But we joined a mastermind group early in our career, so we hadn't even closed a deal yet. But we knew we needed mentorship. We knew we needed guidance. We knew we needed to get around people who were doing the business at a high level if we hope to get to that level at a certain point. So we actually spent $16,000, joined a high-level mastermind where everybody was making 7 figures or more. Yeah. I think the only reason they let us into that group was because we paid $16,000. But the leader of the group told us like, hey, if you guys want to raise private money and you want to really be serious about this business, you need to start documenting what you're doing on social media. And at first we were like, oh, I don't know. And Chris was like, no, I'm super private. He was like, no, listen, trust me. If you document what you're doing, when you're doing walkthroughs, you're meeting with contractors, you're making offers. So I went and started doing it. I started documenting. So if you even go back on our Instagram and our Facebook page, dating back to 2016, 2017, you'll see the evolution, right? I had a lot less gray hairs back then, but we started literally from zero and we built up a following from showing what we were doing, showing our network that we were serious about this business and actually adding value and showing people how to do the business.
But he showed the good, the bad, and ugly, right?
Yeah. So it wasn't just all wins. It was the challenges.
A bunch of wins. In the beginning, there was no wins, right? And we tell people for the first year of being in the business, we hadn't closed one deal, but we were still documenting that journey of walking houses, losing deals, making offers, losing deals. So I think that's what really helped us even all the way up until the television show came.
Yeah, and I think that's what resonates, of course, now more in the sea of social media is what's authentic is not winning every single deal, losing offers, making mistakes on flips left and right, which we all know is something that never stops. People think, oh, you've become an expert flipper. Now, no, something new happens on almost every property.
We learn something new every day.
Yeah. And did you find that the responses that you were getting was also part of what helped you keep going too? You have no deals for the first year, but maybe people are starting to notice and thinking, wow, you guys are really going to do something. I can see it coming.
Oh, absolutely. And that helped us because people started to see it. They started to support it. They started sending us deals.
Even with the driving for dollars.
Driving for dollars and locally, virtually, that was a huge help of really getting to know our neighborhood. But then people started to see that we took it seriously. So then they started investing in us. Like our very first private investor for our first flip was Dedric's mom. And she wasn't by no means a millionaire. She gave us I think it was her entire savings of $10,000 just to do our very first flip. But it was because she saw what we were doing on social media and she saw that we were taking it seriously, and she's all about supporting her baby.
Yeah. But I bet right in the beginning, Dedric, when you said, hey, I got that degree, I got that 9 to 5. Hey, mom, I'm going to leave this and I'm just going to go entrepreneur style and just do real estate. She's probably going to give you that 10 grand right then, right?
No, she was always very supportive, but she wouldn't have given me the 10 grand right then. Plus, I had tried a lot of other businesses. We had tried and failed. I'd done a bunch of MLM companies and stuff, just trying to figure out a way to get out of the corporate rat race.
Yeah.
But again, once she saw that we were going to masterminds, we were investing in ourselves, we were taking action, she would actually watch our kids and fly with us when we went to these masterminds when our kids were young. So she saw how invested we were. Yep. So when we were like, hey, we bought this house for $15,000. We need to put about 25 grand into it. Can you loan us? She loaned us 10 grand. We did the renovation. We refinanced, paid her off with interest. Then she was like, all right, I'm going to get both your brothers to invest. So she got my brothers to invest and the guy, it was rolled from there.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about the masterminds too, because you guys made a big jump by taking 16 grand and plunking it into a mastermind. And I've always said that most masterminds, even if they're kind of not what you expect, if you just do all the work that you're asked to do and make connections, you'll never have to do anything else. You'll learn so much, but too many people, I think, pay the money and expect it to do the work for them. What was your experience in that, and how could you help new people who are thinking like 10, 20 grand, that's a lot?
That's exactly the case. People look at the price first and they're like, oh my God.
That's how I looked at it. The price tag. I didn't
scary.
And the value at first. So Krystal really broke down the value.
I did. And I had to let him know that you join these masterminds and these type of coaching and mentorship programs to shorten your learning curve. Yeah. What we want to do is be a fly on the wall in the room. Right? Because if we're surrounding ourselves with people who are already where we want to be, our natural direction and progression is going to be where they are at. And that's exactly what happened. And we try to educate people on that when they're looking at the price tag of things. Dedric will say, hey, listen, if you hang around 5 broke friends, you're going to make number 6. It's inevitable. Millionaires don't hang around with hundredaires, right? You're not going to see that anywhere. Iron sharpens iron. And I tell people that mastermind, when Dedric and I joined, were the absolute lowest on the totem pole. People were coming into these every quarter, giving their presentations of saying, hey, listen, well, I only added another 50 units to my portfolio. I've only, this quarter, I only made about, 4.2 million. I know I said I was going to make 6. So I'm transitioning, and me and Dedric are sitting here looking at each other like,
we're trying to close our first deal.
How are we supposed to get up here and tell people, well, we cold called 100 people. We sent out, 10 text messages.
Made 10 offers that got rejected.
Right. Like, that's where we were. And these are people who's like, hey, listen, I flipped 50 houses this quarter. I wholesaled 200. And I tell people what that did is either going to expose you or it's going to motivate you.
Yeah.
And that's what it did for us. It exposed us, one, that we weren't doing enough in our business. We were comfortable. We both had 9-to-5s.
Yeah.
We became complacent. We were very comfortable and we were working in and out of our business. So it exposed us and then it motivated us because I told him we will not come back here again and have not moved the needle. We've been here twice and we've been humiliated. And we won't do it a third time. So by that time, by the third quarter, when we came back, you best believe we had some shit to tell them about what we have done.
Yeah, that must have felt good, though, because now you've elevated yourself to the middle part of the room. And then there's other people who are at your spot who then you can help, which always makes us better as well.
Absolutely.
And mind you, Jonathan, we didn't have the $16,000. When we invested in that, we did not have that money saved or on our checking account. I actually had to put it on a credit card. So we had a business credit card and it was a leap of faith. And we looked at each other and we were like, hey, that was kind of like my burning the ships moment because I was like, hey, I have 800 credit. I'm not going to ruin my credit. So I'm plunking down a credit card. This has to work or it has to work. Yeah.
But like you were saying, Krystal, it can go really one of two ways. You can plunk the money down and realize like, hey, I can't keep up. And then it's a loss. Or you say like, that was it. Like, I have to make it work. And you guys decided like, we have to make it work. But you also looked at the people to learn instead of looking and like, oh, they're probably fake or, some people, it's a very weird dynamic of who's looking for these, these masterminds now, because it's people who want the quick fix, but don't want to do any work. And then that other subset, like you guys who are willing to risk part of their savings or borrow just to get in the room. And then they're like, well, now I'm going to get on this rocket ship and go.
Absolutely. And what you learn when you're in these masterminds is people like to help those who are trying to help themselves.
Yeah.
If you're coming and you're just sitting there and you're not saying anything, then guess what? People are not going to waste their energy, time, and breath on you because they know whatever they tell you, there's not going to be action behind that. So when Dedric and I got into this mastermind and we knew we had a $16,000 bill on our credit card we had to pay back, guess what? Everyone in this room was having a conversation. And I don't even like networking at all. Okay. I'm a closet introvert. But 16,000 will motivate you to get up off your butt and have some conversations.
Ask questions
with a pen and paper. Like, oh, okay. Oh, so you're doing that, and okay. So that's working, and that's what happened with Dedric and I. We literally spoke to everyone. We became really, really great friends with everyone, and people are so open to saying, "Hey, listen. Well, this is what I'm doing in my business. When I was where you were at, this is what I did. This is what helped me." And they were willing to give us any and everything, any documentations that we needed, contracts, you name it. That's why you put down that $16,000 or whatever that mastermind costs, because you're getting information that money really can't buy.
Yeah, well, you made a great point. It's also what you're bringing to the table. And what you guys were doing then was being interested and not interesting, because you didn't have the ton to bring to the table. You wanted to be interested. And you found what I've said to people over the years, that true real estate investors love to help other real estate investors.
Yeah.
But exactly what you said, they want to help the ones who come to the table with smart questions, who have done their research and are prepared, not ones who come up and say, hey, can you mentor me? Or, hey, can I just you watch your flip for free? That's a no-win, for you guys. If someone comes to you now and says, hey, can you mentor me? And they don't tell you anything about you or what they've done, that actually sounds like a chore to me, right?
I kid you not. And we get it so often.
Sure,
and I'm like, and you're right. When I hear people who saying, listen, I just did 2 flips, I didn't make a ton of money. All I hear is that you took action.
And you're trying.
Exactly.
And you're trying.
You're putting in the effort.
So now for us is, how can we help you? What do you need? How can we
what can we do to get you from this level to the next level? And that's, I've always said, I want to get your take on this. Coaches and mentors, I think, are very tough for people in the beginning, because most people aren't going to be like you guys and just take the rocket ship. It's very hard. But once you get one or two things going, that's the perfect time to start, because you've developed at least a little system, usually a bad one, and you need to upgrade it. And then when you get into these rooms, people are like, you're doing well, but here's something that can 3x you, and it's not going to even take any more time.
Yeah, and that's the power of association, Jonathan. Like you said, if you go to someone that's a millionaire, someone that's super successful, and you say, hey, will you mentor me? Again, it's a chore, because now they got to stop what they're doing to help you out. Yeah. But when you've paid to be in this room, it is pay to play, but when you're in this room, you've been vetted. So like, all right, this person's invested money and they're investing time and learning. Now they're more willing to sit down and be like, all right, here's what I'm doing. Here's the mistakes I made and how to avoid them, and can kind of lay out that roadmap if you take action on what they recommend.
Yeah, and I've found that a lot of people think that they're paying for the people who are going to be on the stage speaking, and you don't realize that all the people around you who put the same money into the boat to get into that are just as motivated, and those become the people that you guys are probably still in touch with, who become JV partners, full partners, syndicators together, because you're all doing it for the right reason. And the people who aren't, they just end up getting left in the dust anyway.
Absolutely. You make business partners, and a lot of them are lifelong friends.
Yeah, it's so important.
Hey, it's Jonathan. I hope you're enjoying this episode. As you know now, these interludes are just me, and they're brand new, and they're always recorded directly for these episodes. So we're in the middle of an episode with the Polites. Have you watched 50/50 Flip? It's on Hulu now. It was on A&E. I watched some episodes, and I had talked about it on this episode, maybe before, maybe after this. So I suggest going to watch it, hit them up, and watch them do their thing in person. Let's get back to the show.
When you guys were getting started, did you go to any free real estate meetups when you were getting started, just to see who was out there in your area?
We did. Yeah. We went to the meetups. We hear the ads on the radio. Hey, come to the Marriott and learn how to flip houses. And Krystal went, and she was like, hey, Tariq and Christina from Flipping California are going to be and I was like, she's like, you want to come with me? I was like, no. She's like, no, they're going to be. I'm like, they're not going to be there.
So of course is going to be in the back, though.
And she calls me 2 hours into the little seminar. She's like, they haven't shown up. I said, I told you they weren't coming.
Yeah. But we did. We did the RIA meetups. We did a lot of different local meetups, and we find, and I guess, now that I know it is that retargeting. So it's just someone's having a real estate event, and we would go to it and take it for a weekend, a 2-day event, 3-day events. We were going to them left and right, just trying to soak up whatever knowledge we could.
Yeah. Well, let's go all the way back to your first buy. What was the first thing that you guys bought together that started this whole snowball?
Well, my first buy, I bought my first house in 2000. Oh, together. No, our first one would be Grace Avenue. So we ran into a property manager who was looking to offload his portfolio. He was getting up in age. So we bought this house for $15,000. I know it sounds crazy. A little 2-bed, 1-bath in North Carolina. We put about $25,000 into it. Went to a local bank, refinanced. Our mortgage payment was $300 a month. Rented it for $800 a month. Yeah. Cash flowed it for a couple years. And then right after the pandemic hit, the value of that property had gone up to $120,000. So we sold it. And then that, rolled into other rentals and flips as well.
Yeah. Was that kind of a proof of concept for you? You're like, okay, we bought this, we put in money. Wait, now it's worth this. Quickly, you can get some money back and then also have the rent coming in. Was that part of the aha moment? Well, now let's just keep replicating this over and over.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, the aha was when we closed that 6-figure wholesale deal virtually. Yeah. We took that money and we went from 3 units in our portfolio, and we immediately bought 3 or 4 apartment buildings and went to 20 units in our portfolio in a matter of a few months.
On those deals, though, so you went from 11 to 5 and then to over 100 on that. What was the difference with that third wholesale deal? Is it on the buy side, or what did you do differently on that one? Because I know, these prospective wholesalers are listening thinking they're going to get 105K spread right now. They're not. But how did you do it, and how did you continue it to make better spreads along the way?
Yeah, so the difference was the market. The first 2 were in North Carolina, where the average wholesale spread is 10 to 15 grand.
Yeah.
The third one was in Boston, which is New York, LA, any major metro where wholesale fees can be 25, 50K, sometimes even 6 figures. And how we found it was we sent them a postcard. So we literally drove for dollars virtually. We sent them a postcard. The guy called us. He moved to Jersey. So he grew up in Boston, lived in Jersey. He didn't even realize he owned the house. Yeah. So his wife called us back like, yeah, you sent my husband a postcard. We don't own anything in Boston. We were like,
yeah, well, she thinks he's got like another life or something probably.
Right, another wife somewhere. We're like, we're calling the public records. You do. And he got on the phone. He's like, yeah, my uncle who passed, I didn't realize he left me this house in Boston. So there were squatters living in it. It was a whole situation. We were like, hey, do you want to sell it? He was like, yeah, I just found money.
Free money, yeah.
And we were like, well, how much do you want for it? He's like, well, give me $500,000 for it. And we negotiated, got under contract for $475,000. Mind you, we didn't have $475,000.
Yeah.
But we knew, even sitting in North Carolina, we knew the gentrification that was happening in this neighborhood of Boston, condo conversion. So that triple decker was now worth $1.2 million once it was converted to a condo. So we were like, all right, we'll give you $475,000. Made a few phone calls. A couple months later, one of our investor partners up there found a cash buyer who's doing condo conversions in that neighborhood. He bought it from us for $580,000. We did a double close, and the rest was history.
Yeah, and that's a win-win at the time. I mean, of course, now you wish, well, I wish we had done that conversion, but you weren't ready yet.
Right, exactly.
So for you to be able to go $475,000 to $580,000, and then that investor go from $580,000 to eventually over $1 million is really like the good part of wholesaling if you do it correctly.
Yep.
Right. And we thought about it. We were like, man, we might have to move up to Boston and do this condo conversion. We were like, nah, we'll just take the 6-figure fee and build our portfolio down here.
Yeah, but don't you think that was such a smart move? Because it would be so enticing to get a much bigger return in the end, but you would have put yourself in so much potential trouble by trying to leverage the money and the skill set at that time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's kind of why we talked ourselves out of it very quickly, because trying to manage a flip, something that we had never done once to begin
rehab,
with,
condo conversion.
We was like, there's no way, it doesn't make sense. So it's very, and we try to teach people on learning the proper exit strategy for where you're at, not where you want to be. Now, do we want to flip houses back then? Absolutely want to get into it. Were we there? No. So that would have quickly been a disaster. So it's meeting us where we're at. Now, what we were able to do, just like you said, we were able to wholesale that off, make a really nice profit, and then take that profit and acquire more rentals here. And we started, when we started our flipping, with what was the square footage of that house?
Which one?
The one, our first flip.
About 800 square feet.
800 square feet versus, what was the other
3,000 square feet.
A 3,000 square foot, 3-unit apartment. So yeah, I think we made the right decision.
Yeah, but also with that one that you delivered to an investor who was a cash buyer, now you built a great relationship because they know, hey, you found a good deal. You know what a good deal looks like. That probably helped you as you scaled into Boston more, right?
Absolutely.
So we've done multiple deals with the agent who actually bought us that buyer.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what people forget. I always say this, and we go over and over it. You guys are a great example of this as well. Real estate is really all about relationships. Everyone talks about the money and all of the ancillary things and how you finance things. But if you don't have the relationships, you won't get those extra deals. And the more you focus on the relationships, like you did from the start, the more deals will show up over time if you're consistent. Do you guys believe in that and still coach and mentor that way?
So true. It's really about the relationships, like you said, Jonathan. And how do you build those relationships? Is doing what you say you're going to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. Not over promising, but under promising and over delivering.
Yeah.
That's how you build those relationships, so that now when you pick up the phone and call that person, they're like, all right, this person always does what they say they're going to do. We're going to do this deal together.
Yeah. I mean, have things changed now? Obviously, people can see you on TV. Does it make it harder for you? Do people's expectations raise, or they think they're going to do less work and you're just going to guide them into, some perfect deal right away?
It does change a little bit.
I think it's both. Depending on who's approaching us, because you have people who will recognize the name and then put 2 and 2 together with the TV show if we're trying to acquire and buy their property. So now they're thinking
then the price goes up.
Millions of dollars for a 1,500 square foot house, right? Yeah. Now the price is like $600,000.
That's why we have acquisitions managers who do the front end work, so they're not seeing our name.
And then you have people who we coach in the business, and they think they're going to sit back and we're going to do the work for them.
Yeah.
And we have to quickly remind them we didn't have anyone doing the work for us. So I think we definitely get hit from both ends of the stick.
Yeah. Yeah, before we get to how you guys got to the show, how did you set up your team from the beginning? Of course, you always start, as everyone does in a home buying or wholesaling company, with just the two of you, but then you realize, okay, we need some help. Sometimes it's acquisitions manager. How did you find the people who were going to help you grow to the business now for Be Polite, in terms of acquisition, and who's doing everything, marketing? Because those are really important cogs that help you go and do other things, but still feel confident that your business is running.
Yeah, I think a lot of it goes back to relationships and referrals again. So the 4 areas of a real estate company are marketing, acquisitions, which is sales, dispositions, then you got operations, right? So we rely a lot off referrals. Who do you know who's really good, who's an A player? And then we would put those people in place and give them the systems and processes and tools they need to be successful.
And I think a lot of that came from, though, the mastermind that we joined originally. Yeah. They helped us figure out, who our first hires should be as a growing real estate business, right?
The accountability chart and the org chart.
And what business or what part of the business is income producing? Which ones should we really outsource first?
The admin.
When should we outsource it? A lot of people say, I want to outsource something now when your business isn't there yet, right?
Yeah.
So that's also where that mastermind really helped us understand, okay, when are we going to be at a point where we should outsource it and not just because we want to outsource it? And I think with us, our very first hire was an acquisitions manager, someone who could continue to produce revenue, right? Yeah. Versus an admin like I wanted. I wanted a VA who can come in and they said, no, we need someone who you have the marketing, you have the lead flow. You need someone other than your husband who's also talking to these people, locking up deal to bring in more revenue to outsource some of the other things, and then understanding what our time was worth as we were starting to pull and bring in more and more money.
Yeah, that the time was the really important thing, because I look at your first hire as an acquisitions manager as a great buffer, so then you don't have to do every call. Because what I found, the better I got at marketing, the more crappy appointments I would have also, because the marketing was good, so everybody would respond. And then you drive 45 minutes to hear that someone wants $250K over what it's worth, and you're like, well, that was a waste of my time. So if someone else can vet them in the time frame, then Dedric can go out on the really, really hot ones when they're already kind of warmed up and ready. Did that help you guys focus on more things and growing more avenues?
That's exactly the case.
Yep, tremendously. Working on the business versus in it.
Yeah. So how did the show come up? Because I watched a few this morning. I was watching acquisitions. It was a 4-family, the first 4-family that you found where Dedric almost fell through the floors. But it's interesting because everybody thinks like shows are easy. I know that they're not, but how did the whole show come into focus for you guys as investors?
So we had been getting a lot of networks and casting companies hitting us through our DM. So they were messaging us through our DM for about a year or two. It was always, no, we're not interested. We have small kids. That was not even in.
Yeah, we're like, focus. Which ones are real? Like, I mean, the DMs are just like jammed with garbage now.
Yeah. And for us, I didn't even think about, hey, is this real? Is this not? It was just a no. It was, all of it was spam to me. And then A&E had been reaching out once I went back to look at it, had been reaching out for about a year in our DMs. And they ended up finding our 1-800 number through Google, called that, got our secretary, made her promise to get us on a Zoom call. So she scheduled the Zoom call with them. We actually got on the Zoom call with them. First thing, they were talking to us and they said, we absolutely love your social media and what you guys are doing. Let me be clear, we are not a casting company. They said we are A&E Network. Yeah. We are the in-house casting company. We are exclusive to A&E. Our only job is to look for new talent. So they broke that down. It was like casting companies, all they do is trying to get
they wholesale talent.
Basically wholesale talent.
Yeah, you guys already know what that's about. So
exactly. So they said that is not us. So they talked to us about what they were looking at and what they were doing, and how A&E was about to launch 3 new shows. They were getting back into the home space and would love for us to be one of them shows. They were looking at hundreds of people. So they said,
and they preferred couples, but they were looking for people who had an established brand, social media brand and following, which we fit the bill for both of those. But we were like, we're not house flippers.
yeah,
We're actually buy and hold investors.
Yeah.
And they were like, you guys don't flip houses? We're like, yeah, all the houses you see us renovating on social media, those are rental properties. We're not selling them. We just renovate them to a high level so that they look like flips. And they're like, well, okay, don't worry about that. We still want to do a show on you. So we went through Zoom interview after. This was right after COVID, like a few months after COVID. So all these were Zoom calls. So each Zoom call, we get passed on to another executive. They green light us and pass to a higher level. And we made it to the finals. And they're like, hey, it's down between you and another couple. And we didn't really think we were going to get it. We're like, let's just see how far we can take it.
Yeah.
And then after that final Zoom, they were like, you guys got it. We would like to offer you a TV show. And we kind of looked at each other like, oh, that's cool.
That's so awesome.
I guess we have to do it now. And that's when we said, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So 50-50 is renovate for under 50,000 in under 50 days, right? That's the premise.
Correct.
Yes. And the producers came up with that. So again, we're in North Carolina. So when we talk to people from New York, New Jersey, like they're like, are you kidding me? Like you can't even get a freaking parking space for 50,000. But when a producer, this was in 2021, when they saw what we were doing and were following us for a few months as we did our daily business, they were like, you guys are buying house, you're renovating houses for about $50,000 and it's taking about 50 days. And that's how they came up with the name 50-50 Flip. Now, 2024, that's a lot harder to do. Most of our rehabs are at least six figures now because of inflation. And now we're doing, a lot more complex rehab jobs. But that's kind of where the name came from.
Yeah. And then it also depends on the age of the house. So this season, people will see that we did a couple that were not 1930 and 1940 homes. So we were about that 50,000 mark. So we tell people there's a lot of different variables that come into play when doing those houses. We don't do, except for this season, we did a couple because they fell in our lap. Yeah. We don't typically do gut jobs. We try to stay away from guts.
Gut jobs don't really go for 50 days.
Exactly.
With the TV, they want to see the gut jobs because they want to see the huge transformation. So it's kind of that balance there.
Yeah, that's what I was curious about. How can you keep it kind of realistic to what the brand that you built, when of course TV has a role to play and like we want it to be a good show? How did that work? To me, it looks pretty similar, but of course the show, we always used to joke like, well, there's no way that costs that, but you have to figure it out along the way, like what's close and what's still going to be a good representation of what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty consistent with our brand. The reason we chose A&E is because they do shoot documentary style. Yeah. Our HGTV and some of the other networks is very scripted. We're like, hey, we're not going to get on TV and pretend that something costs $1,000 when it really costs $10,000. We're going to tell you the real numbers, and we're going to be ourselves. We're not going to get on there and pretend to be someone we're not. So, everything is pretty consistent with what you see is what you get with our brand.
And with that, for season 2, Hulu had actually bought the rights to season 2 from A&E. Yeah. And that was like the first merger of its kind with A&E. A&E had been trying to get onto Hulu's network for years now. Disney didn't want to cross the audiences. So
Disney's a parent company of Hulu and A&E.
So they told them, submit all the shows you want us to consider. They submitted all the shows that they wanted them to consider, and they chose 3. They chose Rachel Ray's show, Big Boy from Outkast, and then Us was the 3rd show. So that's how we ended up on Hulu for the 2nd season.
Yeah. Awesome. And what's that been like in terms of, does it help your business now? I mean, I'm assuming that it does, but it can also bring like other weird opportunities that you probably don't want.
No, the TV show definitely helps our business. I mean, we get calls every week from people who say, hey, I saw you on a TV show. Yeah. I would love to sell you my house. Right. And
no need for the postcards as much anymore because they can just flip on Hulu and say like, wait, I know them.
Exactly. So being on that national platform, it definitely takes your business to another level. So it's definitely been a blessing, to say the least, that where, it's either someone saying, hey, listen, I have a property, I have some land or what have you, or saying, hey, listen, I have a home, a generational home that I didn't see the value in until I saw your TV show. Yeah. And now I've decided to keep it. Now I'm fixing up Big Mama's house and we're going to renovate it, keep it in the family. And we get those weekly, someone who's saying, hey, I didn't see the value in my family home until I saw this show. So that's also been amazing testimonies to hear. So that's why I said that the show has definitely been a blessing.
Yeah. I mean, we were saying before we hopped on just about podcasts in general, people can hear just one snippet from something and it can change the way they're thinking about it. Just like you said, they say, I saw that episode of the show. Now I don't need to sell this. It's not that much work to do if I find the right people. Yep. It can really change what somebody's whole thought of real estate and holding property is just by a 20-minute show or 30-minute show.
Yeah. That's one of our mottos is don't sell Big Mama's house. Like you said, a lot of people have these houses
they've inherited
from their grandparents, and they don't see the value. But when they see our show, they're like, man, you restored that 1920s house and it was all run down and beat up and you guys restored it. And we don't sell every house, right? Some of the properties we actually keep, especially the apartment buildings and multifamily, we keep those in our portfolio for long-term wealth. So we show people how you can renovate and refinance and keep that property on your books versus selling everything off.
Yeah. And don't you guys think, I mean, there's a lot of rhetoric out there about people not wanting to buy older homes, but in my opinion, older homes were built better. They come with some other oddities, but there's a reason that they've been standing for 60 to 100 years, instead of like these new construction with sketchy contractors who are just trying to build as many as possible.
Absolutely. We were in Boston last weekend, like Krystal said, and I'm driving by and it's like the house circa 1787 and it's still standing. I'm like, that's because the wood that they were growing back then is like real wood. It's not this manufactured lumber that you have just growing up these houses today.
Yeah. And
so there's a difference.
Those houses are over 100 years old and they're still standing. People are still
200
living.
Years, 300 years.
And people are still living in them. I mean, and you see where there are some people who value the old, right? Yeah. Versus the new. And I can understand that with us flipping houses and we see how these houses are built and we see the wood and we see the craftsmanship and things of that nature. So I love older homes. Absolutely love them. I love the architecture in them. I love going in and just seeing the unique features. Like when we go into these houses and see stuff from the 20s, 1910, and I'm looking at Dedric like, how can we keep this? How can we repurpose
rear stairwells, butler pantries, all the kind of oddities. Those are my things too. And I don't know about you guys, but I've found that at least in my market where there's a lot of new builds and a lot of high end, I like a unique home because then as a flipper, when I put it out, I won't get everybody because some people just want a standard colonial that's new. That's fine. But I'll get people who are obsessed with the house because there's nothing else like it on the market. And to me, if you're selling, that's a great opportunity. And even if you're doing like a 2-family renovation for rental, if you go a little more high end, you're going to get people who are more excited about it, which means better long-term tenants. Have you experienced that? Because you were talking about you were going a little bit higher end on your renovations for rentals before.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, again, our rentals are flip grade. So we don't put contractor grade. We put everything as if we were going to live in it into our rental property. So that definitely helps us attract higher quality tenants. And then we also have a lot of short-term rentals. So what we notice is that our regular single-family long-term rentals, the cash flow was minimal at best, right? So we're like, let's turn some of these into corporate rentals, rent them out to traveling nurses, short-term rentals. And when we did that, we definitely found that the cash flow increased significantly for a lot of our rental properties.
And it also allows us at that point to offer more affordable units in some of our apartment buildings. So we tell people we're not huge investors, but we do also know that, there's a affordable housing crisis. So we do our small part. So I tell people what they see on television and on the shows is something that we've been doing before the camera started rolling. So that's the only reason why they're able to document what we're doing is because we were already doing it and providing affordable housing for people. So for us, these houses and the apartments and these older homes really do, how can I put it?
So when we do for example, with the 4-unit, out of the 4 units, 2 are long-term rentals, 2 are short-term rentals.
Yeah, I love that.
But the rental income from the short-term rentals is like $4,000 versus $1,200. So that allows us to subsidize the long-term rentals and make those affordable.
Right. When people are like, how can you give someone an apartment for $500 or $550 and it's 2024? That's how we're able to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, that's part of that. So I grew up with my dad being a landlord, and he used to take me as a kid to meet all the tenants. I knew them all, and eventually I became the collector for those. But I would say, like, why is this one $500 and that one $750? He's like, because I can. Like part of being a landlord and providing affordable housing is figuring out this dichotomy like you did. 2 short terms give you much more income. The people will understand because now you can rent it to them for what you want.
Yep.
And especially
Exactly.
from what you said before on your first buy, if you're a good house buyer and you know how to buy and how to renovate, you can really rent it for whatever you want because you're so ahead of the game when you do the refi that you can really help more people out, especially in an area where you live. And then people know like, wow, they turn out really nice rentals at affordable fee. You could have tenants for 10, 15 years.
And Jonathan, that's why ownership is so key, because so many people sit on the sidelines like, oh, what's going on? Gentrification. Why are they charging this, charging that? Listen, if you own the property, you can set the rate. So if you're like, hey, I want to give this person a break because of XYZ reason, as the owner, when you own stuff, you can do that. So that's why ownership is so key.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think of course, I think new investors who are becoming landlords for the first time definitely make mistakes on choosing tenants. They get the sob story and they take it. But once you learn, sometimes there is a good story behind it. Yeah. And the only way they're going to get a rental is if you help them out and take a little bit of risk. But again, you're the owner. So as long as you're not putting yourself in really a risk potential with a bad tenant, which is always a possibility. Yeah. But, those relationships, for you guys now who have been landlords for so many different properties, how much have you learned just as being a landlord, what it takes? Because I found everybody, when they're new, they're just so scared of evictions. But I've said, listen, good landlords don't do evictions. They know how to choose tenants, work with tenants, become their friends. And sometimes it doesn't work out, but you're always working together over the time to try to make it work.
So it's been a journey. So like I said, I bought my first house was a triple decker in Boston in 2008. I was 25 years old. I lived in a basement apartment. I rented the 2 upstairs units. So my tenants were 40, 45 years old. I'm 25. Yeah. So it wasn't very pleasing for them to walk downstairs and give this kid rent money, right?
Yeah.
When I met Krystal, she became the property manager. So she was like, they keep giving you sob stories. I'm the manager and I live there and I'm the owner. She was like, we're going to create a management company. She created a name, an email, phone number. So it's like, all right, don't call Dedric anymore when you got a rent or you got a story. Call the management company. And I noticed that the whole conversation was different when we were contacting this management company. Yeah. So what I learned is that I don't even like tenants knowing who I am. Right. Yeah. Because again, when you have that personal relationship, especially if you're a new landlord, sometimes people can take advantage of that. So right now we have all third-party management. We don't manage any of our own units. It's a business. They deal with the property manager, right? But again, in the beginning, we did self-manage and we had to learn a lot of those lessons the hard way.
And even the ones who know who we are and they know that we own the property, like you said, you have a relationship with them. So you were able to build that trust. Hey, listen, if they're a little late on their rent, it's okay, right? You know the situation, you know what's going on, you have that relationship, they've always been good for it. And I'm very big on building relationships with people. Like my husband always tells people, if I could give it all away, I would. Because I am more so the philanthropist at heart. Like that's what I would, if I could, I would just help people all day. That's where I find my joy. So owning real estate has given us that opportunity to do that, to be able to say, hey, listen, you need some help. You need a place to say, hey, you want to own a home. Let's do lease options. So that's why we find properties and we do rent to owns to give people a piece of that American dream of home ownership who otherwise would never qualify for it.
Yeah, and rent to own is pretty safe for you guys because it's the same renter in there. They have a little bit more scale and ability to take care of the property because they're trying to buy it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. I think the people who've built up larger renter portfolios run into that option more, and those who take it can really be successful, but really help people more because you're working with them to learn how to become a homeowner carefully because they're not going to qualify in the beginning, but maybe in 5 years when they're working on their credit and everything, and they have the 5 years of good rent payments, then they're going to be ready.
Exactly.
Yes, and providing them with the resources that they need. So we're providing them upfront with credit repair. We're providing them with mortgage companies who can work with them over the course of the next year to 2 to make sure that they stay on track.
Yeah, but that's changing lives. I mean, and that's probably what you were thinking in the beginning, like, how can we do this? And then you see the scale. And that goes back to what you said, Dedric, it's ownership. Because when somebody loses their job as a renter, I mean, companies are downsizing left and right. You can't just say, well, you have to pay the rent. I understand the rent is due, but I used to come home and my dad would have ledgers, 3, 4, 5 months behind, and he would tell me the story. And I was thinking business wise, I'm like, oh, well, can you just kick them out? He's like, I don't want to kick them out. They've been there 8 years. So I slowly had to understand that. Have you guys really started to figure out that, like, it's not going to be perfect, but you do the best that you can as landlords?
Absolutely.
We try to work with people as best we can.
Yeah, it's a must. And we try to be what we would have wanted someone to be for our mothers. That to me is what's key. That's why we are landlords the way we are. That's why we over renovate our properties. Because we believe in giving people a really nice place to stay, because we understand and we know that pride of, even if it's renting, you have a pride. When you have pride in the place that you live, you're going to take care of it, right? And we grew up in places that we look at now, and I show my kids and they're like, oh my God, you live there? Like, did it look like that? And I'm like, yes, it looked like this in 85, the same way. So because we went through that, and walk those shoes, we are able to now. Exactly.
Yeah. So I grew up in Section 8 housing, right? I was raised by a single mom in Boston, grew up in Section 8. Without that Section 8 voucher, we would not have been able to live in the renovated brownstone that I grew up in, right? Also, we've been evicted before. So I've been on the other end of being evicted. So when it's a case where it's like, all right, should we evict this person? I've experienced that. So we don't just summarily say, hey, we're going to evict them. We try to work with them as best we can.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants to do an eviction. It's terrible and not fun.
No, you don't. As a landlord, you really don't.
No, you're going to have an angry tenant. I mean, it doesn't take much for them to ruin the property. So it's really in everybody's best interest to try to work it out. One thing that I just wanted to connect, which I think is important before we get to the end, is when you guys over renovate the rental property, you're setting yourself up perfectly, because then if you have a long-term renter and you want to turn it into short or midterm, you already have an upgraded property. Whereas if you had kind of, linoleum floors and white appliances, it might not work. You might not be able to turn it and get the same type of immediate return from short or midterm.
Which is exactly what we've done with a couple of houses. We went from long-term rentals to short-term rentals and midterm stays.
And then when it's time to get an appraisal done, or even when it's time to sell, we don't have to go and renovate it because we already made it a flip quality home.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And one more thing about being local, you're focused on one or two markets here. That gives you the opportunity to build your own comps as well. So if you have, 10 rental properties within a 3-mile radius and you renovate one to the hilt, you just made a comp for the next one that you're going to do. So all you have to do is follow the blueprint and keep going back and forth. Then if you sell one, you've created appraisal comps for all of your others. Has that been something that you've done successfully while clustering close together?
We do that all the time.
It's the best, right? I love it.
With the TV show, almost every house that we flipped on the TV show, we set the new comp for the neighborhood, which we own properties in that city. So it just helps our portfolio.
And Dedric will be like, oh, now this property of ours is worth this amount because we're setting the comp. But we also, what we tell people is people who live in these neighborhoods come back to us and they'll find out who we are. They'll find us on social media and they'll thank us, or they'll come to the house when we're filming and they'll thank us because their home value has now went up and they've increased their family's net worth. And a lot of these neighborhoods also, some of them are impoverished neighborhoods, right? And they're coming to us, some of them with tears in their eyes, thanking us for what we've done for the neighborhood. And we like to say it's like that trickle down effect. Yeah. Once they see that one house that we've done in the neighborhood and realize that their house looks almost identical to it, now they're like, man, I didn't realize my house had so much potential. Yeah. And you come back in 6 months, and we've seen where the whole row of houses, you start to see people painted the exterior, people done landscaping. People put awnings, like every little thing just to make their house and see the beauty in it again.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times there's people who may be considered bad renters, but they were living in a bad landlord situation. Yeah. If the landlord's not taking care of the property, why would the tenant take care of the property? Exactly. And then when they go to something that's upgraded, it's no problem. And one more thing, though, that I think is really important, gentrification always gets like a bad name because it's assumed that all gentrification means moving the people out of the neighborhood that have always lived there. You guys are really doing gentrification in the right way. You're redoing the properties there and trying to allow the residents to stay in the area because you have so many options in the area. And that's really what gentrification is. Of course, there's going to be some changeover over time, but we want everybody to be able to stay in their neighborhood, find better affordable housing in the area so it doesn't become a runaway from an area.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like you said, there's a lot of landlords and slumlords. I'll just go ahead and say it.
Yeah, for sure.
They keep the rent at $800 a month when market is $2,000. Why? Because they don't want to do repairs.
Yeah.
So they say if we keep the rent dirt cheap, the tenant's not going to contact us for repair. So it's kind of a downward spiral that happens a lot.
Right. The whole building's falling apart.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we end up buying a lot of those properties from those landlords, and then we'll come in and renovate it to the hilt and put it back into really good service and improve that neighborhood.
Yeah. And again, as we said, the whole bonus of that is you can choose your rent. You don't have to go all the way to the top. You can do something very nice so it's fair on both sides. And then you're creating better opportunities for people in the area.
Exactly. That's the key.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think it's pretty easy to find you guys, but tell everyone where the best place to find you is.
Yeah, the best place to find us is on social media. So all things Be Polite Properties on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook. Also, we have a website called Polite Wealth Portal. Polite, we'll put that in the show notes. So if anyone's looking to learn how to get started investing in real estate, whether it's wholesaling, fix and flip, buy and hold, they go to politewealthportal.com. We do a lot of free trainings too, Jonathan. So we do like a monthly free training showing people how you can get started in real estate, whether you have a real estate license or not, or no matter how much cash or credit you have.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm glad we got this on the book. I'm glad I got a couple shows in before we here. Now I got to finish them out. I got to finish that 4-family episode now. But I really appreciate you spending the time, and it's good to connect with you. I look forward to staying in touch.
Thanks for having us
Jonathan.
on.
Yeah.
Definitely.
All right. That was Dedric and Krystal Polite of 50/50 Flip and Be Polite Properties. I'm Jonathan Green. We'll see you next episode. Thanks so much for listening to that episode with the Polites. I hope you enjoyed it. You can tell we had a lot of fun. They were great. And you should know by now that you're getting previews of the next episode at the end of each episode, and they're not canned. They are actually me sitting down and recording direct for each show. Next episode, my friend Chris Seveny from where we've met for 10 years and had been talking on Bigger Pockets, and now we have him from Seveny Investments. This is a show a lot about note investing, which is always an interesting topic because I personally don't know a lot about it. I got a lot of information from Chris, but he talks about his entire journey, which encompasses every aspect of real estate investing. So stay tuned next episode for me and Chris. We'll see you then.